Welcome into the latest edition of the Spot Track Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here, along with the money man, Mike Ginnitti. The integration you didn't know you needed is live. SpotTrack.com just got even better for our sports bettors out there. Spot Track visitors can now see the Bettor Edge community lines and interact with upcoming action directly as you check out the latest news, contracts, and happenings in the sports world. But it gets even better. Sign up for the first time. You get $20 on the house. Just use the promo code SpotTrack at sign up. That's bettoredge.com or on their mobile app. Pretty cool stuff. I was checking that out, doing some click-throughs there, and it's a nice feature as you guys continue to progress the site.
Yeah, the coolest thing about it is, well, I mean, you're linked up with content you're looking for. So if you're looking to bet this Pacers-Thunders game tonight, and you happen to be looking at the financials of those two teams, well, there's a juicy finals bet sitting right there for you from Bettor Edge on our site. And you can make that bet without having to leave Spot Track. So I think that's the best part for both worlds here. It's quick, it's easy, and you're still getting the content you came for originally, which was the Spot Track financials. So it's win-win, I think. Just to go out and hammer it, make some bets.
Absolutely. I've been using Bettor Edge for years. You get much better lines. The juice is significantly decreased because there's no book that needs to get their hold, and that's something to consider there. It is the Paul George NBA Finals, after all, that sits in front of us. Pretty wild how connected he is to the success of these two final squads. I did some digging on this today, and it is just remarkable how much I don't know, does he get like a free courtside seat for this, just given his involvement here?
I think he's busy podcasting, isn't he? I think he's back to it. So he's our competition right now. We've got to keep his name out of our mouths, I think.
Perhaps in a moment. But let me give you the details on this. The Pacers sent Paul George to the Thunder in exchange for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. They then turned Sabonis into Tyrese Halliburton with the deal that they made with the Sacramento Kings. The Kings thought that they had a logjam in the backcourt with De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. Now they have neither of them. The Thunder turned Paul George into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, several draft picks for which they are still cashing in on, but one of those turned into fellow All-Star Jalen Williams. So as we look at this in hindsight, what is the lesson learned here for smaller market teams? Because when you look at this, these are pretty aggressive moves. Paul George was take how you feel about him in his current state, put that to the side. He was one of the best players in the NBA in his prime. For teams in middle of America to be moving a guy like this in order to get better is or even bringing him in, because that was the initial attempts for OKC before they sent him packing. Pretty aggressive moves from these teams.
Yeah, I think the what we've learned here is that the Pirates should trade Paul Skeens, right? Is that not the logical takeaway?
Exactly
that's
where I was going.
No,
with this.
that's I twisted a little too far. All right, look, Paul George has helped many programs out on the court and off the court, and there's just no question about that. But I will say this: we're zeroing in on him specifically because of these two teams. And by the way, you can zoom out to had the Lakers gotten him and all sorts of fun stuff, which have been unpacked, by bigger shows here over the course of the last couple of weeks here. But this is the NBA in a nutshell. This is it. I mean, nobody sits on their hands too long with any superstar. Heck, LeBron James has moved 4 times, right? I mean, that's all we need to know. Patrick Mahomes is never moving, never. He is staying in Kansas City for life, and they will make certain of that. So it is the antithesis of the NBA, which is you are here to be here today and to be traded tomorrow, because both of those things hold extreme value to a franchise, big or small, right? So the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Pacers acting like big teams is just what you have to do, right? You have to take, and maybe the Lakers get these players for longer because they can afford it, because they can go over the apron. We're seeing that with Boston a little bit, right? The bigger cities can afford to maybe stretch this out more. But in terms of the short term, I'm getting 1 or 2 great years out of these superstar players, and then I'm going to have to turn them into groups of players to match salaries plus draft picks and start the process all over again. what they've earned by this, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is they've earned the clout of showing the rest of the league that they are willing to do this, and not just, here and there, right? Not the Miami Marlins, if I had to give a bad example, whereas every 10 years we're going to put our chips in and then rip it right down the next season. That doesn't gain you any respect across the league in terms of free agency and things like that. They've earned respect by taking big swings, positively and negatively, win and loss, and now they're certainly bearing the fruit of a couple of really nice moves that do indeed stem from Paul George somehow.
And I think for me, the lesson learned, and I look at the Oklahoma City side, is they took a big swing in adding Paul George and the attempt was to win a championship with him as one of their star players. Then when they swung out of that, they landed where they are right now. And I think that to me, that's the lesson, is that a lot of small market teams are afraid to make that move because, well, what if that guy doesn't spend the rest of his career here? That's not the way to think about this. If it doesn't work, you can pivot out of it. The pivot out after making the swing to bring him in, to me, is the lesson in all of this that every small market team should try and replicate.
It's really I feel like this part of it isn't discussed enough because it's the most important part with sports business these days. The Clippers had a very aggressive timeline, right? They were putting everything they had into right now, today, and maybe one more season. And that's why Paul George meant that much more to them than SGA did, who just needed 18 to 24 more months to become the SGA we now know him to be. And OKC had all the time in the world. Okay, they realized pretty quickly that the Russell Westbrook, Paul George experiment was going to be fine, but not nearly the degree that's going to put them in championship conversation. And when that's the case, and by the way, we're going to talk about the Knicks, I'm sure, they just figured that out too in a much more aggressive manner, that they were great, but not championship great. And once OKC knows that, or Indiana knows that, these smaller market teams, everything's on the table. Everybody's tradable. Every move becomes possible. And they were certainly willing to let SGA grow up in their system a little bit, whereas the Clippers simply weren't. That's where small market teams can win, is go find somebody like Dallas, right, who is looking to win immediately within the second, and send them somebody who, isn't going to be in your 4-year plans, but is certainly in their 4-month plan. And they can win those trades. And these two teams won trades because they had that mindset in mind.
Yeah, post-draft scouting perhaps is a really important quality for these teams. Just because you didn't get the guy in the draft doesn't mean that you can't go get him from a team that has that accelerated timeline. Interesting points to bring up. Okay, before I transition to baseball, you mentioned the New York Knicks. Yeah. They fired Tom Thibodeau, and who knows what direction they're going in from here. A highly aggressive move from another aggressive franchise. What do you think of their decision to move off of the most successful head coach they've had since Jeff Van Gundy?
Yeah, I buried the lead there a little bit, right? They clearly internally think that he has taken them to his threshold, and they have to get to a bigger threshold as a team or as an organization, obviously, which is all the way up to championship caliber. We've seen this a couple of times. I think the one that stands out the most is that Detroit situation a bunch of years back, where Larry Brown kind of came off the couch, stepped into a Detroit Pistons roster, and was able to take them to the finish line. Steve Kerr over Mark Jackson in Golden State, right? Another kind of in the moment shocking move. And then all of a sudden it became, oh yeah, Steve Kerr's a Hall of Fame coach. What are we doing here?
Right.
So that's the plan. That's the play here for the Knicks, is to find that coach that can take, I would imagine, at least 95% of these pieces, which will roll into next season, and put them into championship caliber conversations. That's much easier said than done. I'm going to throw a question back to you, because we've talked a little bit about this. What's next for Tibbs? What's next for Tom Thibodeau, who's sitting on $30 million of house money, as you know, the world now knows, as a buyout from this extension with New York? But is there a team that will kind of step back and start at square one with Tom Thibodeau after what? This is now the third team that has done extremely well with him, but not enough, right? You're not going to win a championship with Tom Thibodeau based on all of the data we have. But is there a team that is willing to go from average to above average under his threshold.
It's a shame that that the Memphis Grizzlies already upgraded their interim coach, Isola, I think is how you pronounce his last name, but he would have been perfect for the Memphis Grizzlies. They need to get a whole lot more serious in order to get over that hump, and he's as serious as they get. I think he could really straighten out Ja Morant, and if he can't do it, then nobody can, but they've already made their decision. I don't have the full list in front of me of available positions right now, but somebody's going to give this guy a shot. There are 3 types of coaches in the NBA. There's the growth coach, the guy that's going to get your young players molded and better and, seasoned to be professionals, get them ready for their prime. Then there's the grind it out, get them over the hump coach. That's Tom Thibodeau. I am going to make your good team better. And then there's the champions, and every team ultimately is after the champions, but not all of those guys are available at all times. And some guys that look like they should fit that mold don't, and they end up winning coach of the year, and then they get fired anyway. That's it. Like, those are your options. So there is definitely a place in this world for Tom Thibodeau. Do you have the list in front of you by chance?
I'm quickly looking at things here. The one that stands out slightly, I mean, did Denver take the interim tag off? They did, right?
Yeah, they did. Adelman is the head coach now.
Yeah, that's and
the Suns hired Jordan Ott. And it's another angle that I wanted to discuss. So I'm actually going to skip ahead here because the Suns hired a guy that nobody had ever heard of. They got one of the 2 Cavs assistants that's on the market for a job, and they're gobbling up all of these interviews. It does seem to me like part of the trend that we're seeing right now with these younger, formerly video coordinator, it's like the Spoelstra vibe kind of thing.
Yeah,
some of this has to be financially driven, because when you go after the Thibodeaus, the Doc Rivers, these guys come with a price tag because they've been around the block for a while and they have resumes. Are the guys that don't have NBA coaching resumes, is part of the reason they're getting hired is because you can hire them on a discount. If you're going to move off of your head coach within a couple of years anyway, why not hire the Otts and the Adelmans of the world?
Yeah, there's a bunch of factors here. We're seeing this in most of the sports, the trend to younger. Certainly, the money is a big part of that conversation, and so is the control. You bring in somebody this is sort of entry level for them, and you can kind of push them around a little bit and give them some at least restrictions as to how much power they're going to have, right? Versus bringing in a Thibodeau who knows exactly what he needs, wants, and expects out of both a front office and a roster. That's a much more complicated situation for any front office to have to deal with here, let alone one that I think is a little bit more, I don't know, playing off the side a little bit here, right? Matt Ishbia is going to do what he's going to do, and he's going to throw around a lot of big numbers to go with it. So I don't hate this fit. I don't hate, at least what I'm learning about Jordan Ott, I'll put it this way. He's got a really nice pedigree, a really nice resume, as you mentioned. He's coming from a Cavs organization that I think went through what the Knicks are about to go through. We forget this. They were a successful team in the East, fired a coach who went and made the Detroit Pistons a successful team in the East, brought in Kenny Atkinson, and they did level up. Not all the way, right? They still flamed out, unfortunately, because of injuries, but they have leveled up because of a coaching change. And this Jordan Ott kid is a part of that process in Cleveland. Yeah. So I get that part of it. I also think, and I'm gonna play a hot take guy a little bit here. I think there's a very real world where Cleveland and Phoenix are discussing players in the next couple of weeks when July 1st comes around. And if there's a connection to some of the Cavaliers now becoming Phoenix Suns under Jordan Ott, I think that makes sense too. So it may be a trail of breadcrumbs to future movement here when we get to the crazy offseason that we know we're going to get from the NBA.
Does seem like Phoenix is not going to sit on their hands, but yeah, what you said about JB Bickerstaff and Kenny Atkinson, the Pistons get better after the Cavs fired him, and then the Cavs get better. It makes NBA coaching could be one of the toughest evaluations for people that sit in seats like you and I, because it just kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense sometimes. Let's transition to Major League Baseball. David Sampson, the former president of the Miami Marlins turned media guy. He was the president from 2002 to 2017. called Jac Caglianone's call-up, quote, the most irresponsible move I've seen in quite a long time. Samson was citing the fact that the Royals could have waited another 2 weeks and saved themselves a year of arbitration eligibility. So I know you have a take on this. What's the logic here from Kansas City, and do you agree with their decision?
First of all, somebody formerly attached to the Miami Marlins telling other organizations how to handle their business, especially when it becomes to being cheap, right? And putting one over on their young players who make less than $800,000. That's the most Marlins thing I've ever heard in my life. So let's just get not exactly a credible source making this claim. Let's put it that way. Kansas City, look, they're not the Marlins, and they haven't been for quite some time. In fact, I still have PTSD from the 2016 Marlins beating up on my Mets in the World Series, an organization that went from 0 to 100 in about 18 months. They do have the ability to do that. They are in the process, it appears, of ramping up for a situation just like that about 10 years later. And they have been intelligent in terms of drafting some international prospects and taking really nice bundled free agent swings, right? So they are not looking for Juan Soto. They are looking for 4 players that can add up to $100 million contracts every offseason for the past 3 off seasons. They have been doing the work. They have been spending dollars rationally. And now they get to bear the fruits of some of these young kids, right? We've already seen Bobby Witt Jr. come up and get a contract extension in about 8 at-bats, right? And many expect Jac Caglianone to be that next player. He has been mashing through the minor league system. He was promoted just days into AA ball, up to AAA ball, and he looks to be every bit the fit. So Kansas City's mindset here is twofold. The first is easy. This is a good team, a budding team that's going to get better with him in the roster. Why are we waiting? Get him here. Let's do this right now and make him a part of the next 4 months, not 3.5 months, right? The other part of it is optics. And I know this sounds like such a terrible take, but it matters. And it matters more today than it has ever mattered ever because of us, because of the 9 million podcasts and the 40 billion X accounts that talk about this stuff constantly, left and right, up and down, right? When teams crunch players out of an incentive late in the season, right? That could pay a guy $50,000 if he has 2 more at bats. This happens. The Brewers got absolutely crushed for this 6 months ago, last September, when they did stuff like this and they DFA'd players because they were coming up on plate appearance counts. It matters. And bringing up Caglianone 12 or 11, 13 days before the service time threshold would have gone in their favor matters to them, right? The 2 weeks early that they did this is now something they can hang their hat on versus having to deal with the PR for the next calendar year. It also gives him time to come up here and win AL Rookie of the Year, which would have given him the full year of service time anyway and made all of this a moot point. So they're basically just saying, look, this guy's too damn good to stay down. We're going to look better by bringing him up before that service time threshold because there will be way more people saying, why did you do it this way versus the few people stepping up attached to probably organizations that love doing this saying, I can't believe you did this. You're making us all look like fools, right? And that's what this is. Owners want the ability to continue to do this, and the Kansas City Royals just made it a little less hard to do it because they decided to be the good guy, not the bad guy here. And baseball needs a lot more good guys going forward.
Well, it's a shame you don't have a strong take on this.
Yeah, right.
Is this not becoming the new norm across Major League Baseball where teams are opting to not manipulate service availability?
It's definitely getting there, right? It's the majority of organizations, especially with top first round picks. Look, there's plenty of mid-round guys who are maybes, right? And by the way, the CBA still allows them to do this. So if there's a question with a player, then give yourself the extra half year of service time. Do it. You know what I mean? When there's a reason to do it, do it. There's just been no reason. This guy has given you every reason not to do it, right? Paul Skeens made the Pirates camp out of year 1 in February. There was absolutely no reason. When the numbers are so glaring that sending this player down to the minor leagues or keeping him in the minor leagues is actually going to be negative press for you, you just have to say no at that point, right? Because there's too much, and I'm air quoting, press, right, that can crush you on a big level, to the point of where it can actually hurt your franchise and keep people from showing up to your ballpark. So yeah, it's becoming the majority, and the fans are the ones that are getting us there, unfortunately, which is a good reason.
One of the things I geek out most over at SpotTrack.com is when you get way out in front of something. And you've done that again, predicting notable NFL summer extension candidates. Yeah. The article found right now at the website, a couple of quarterbacks on there, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, James Cook, who's in a bit of a contract battle with Buffalo. Kyron Williams is in there as well. He would be an obvious one, but he's got injury concerns. Terry McLaurin, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton at wide receiver. Which of these names do you think could potentially beat that 2026 offseason extension and maybe even get it prior to that?
Yeah, I've got 23 names here, and for the most part, I'm predicting that they do get an offseason extension, just because we do have plenty of time. There's plenty of reason to go earlier than later, as we've seen with a bunch of teams in the past. I think the name that I'll focus on here is TJ Watt. He's kind of the edge rusher that hasn't gotten too much attention outside of the Pittsburgh market, because Trey Hendrickson is, a really juicy story and still could be traded at some point. And Micah Parsons and Dallas, of course, are always going to be top billing. And now Aiden Hutchinson, seemingly healthy back with Detroit, was playing at a $40 million level and now appears ready for that $40 million contract. So there's a lot of juice in the edge defender world, but Watt might be the biggest story, because Pittsburgh is in flux, clearly, still have not figured out a way left or right on Aaron Rodgers or the quarterback position. A lot of the roster is depleted or kind of in a holding pattern right now. Not many people love the draft they just had. Mike Tomlin has to be squarely on the hot seat at this point in time. And 30-year-old TJ Watt is on an expiring contract and should be, at minimum, asking for a 2 to 3 year guarantee of $35 million per year plus. So there's a lot of competing situations happening here, but all signs point to, and I believe negotiations are well within reason here, all signs point to Watt getting $100 million guaranteed over the next couple of weeks here. So that's going to be a bit of an eye roll situation, depending on how this Pittsburgh team kind of holds serve in 2025. But that may be one of those things where you're paying just because of the name and the legacy. But man, the roster to construction process does not call for TJ Watt to get this extension going forward.
Well, which is crazy to say, because he's just so valuable to that team, and he's such a stealer too. But is there a dance that's going to go on? Because I'm looking at those edge defenders, and we got a couple of guys that could be market resetters. And then if you're the next guy, then you get to reset the reset. Aiden Hutchinson, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons are the three names that stand out. All three of those guys, to me, are worthy of being market setters.
I think Watt and Hendrickson kind of land in the old guy room a little bit more, right? Which by the way is like $35 million a year for a couple years guaranteed. Hutchinson and Parsons should really push the $40 million per year, 125 guaranteed mark. That should be the going rate for those two players, because of their age, because of their production, and because of their markets, right? I mean, there's a lot of things going their way right now. So those are the two names that should really push this market to a big level. And by the way, the cornerback room has already gone through a market reset with the Stingley Juniors of the world, and Sauce Gardner and Trent McDuffie should be right there. So we're in some really nice spots defensively speaking. By the way, Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore is going to obliterate the safety market when this thing's done. And I think that one might wait until next spring, but we'll have to wait and see. But it's a huge next few months for defensive extensions after just kind of an ad nauseum run of quarterbacks and wide receivers for the last 2 to 3 off seasons.
Yeah, that defensive list is nice. You got Trent McDuffie on there, defensive back, Sauce Gardner. Statistically had a down year last year, but still
he's not being shy, Brandon. He's on X pretty much every day, retweeting people who are valuing him one way or another, talking about other people's contracts. He is looking for $28 million a year, and I think because of the market and maybe the lack of having to pay a lot of players in that roster, his agent's probably going to get it. He's got one of the bigger, more impressive agents on all of football, so we'll see.
Again, you can check out this list at spotrac.com. Is there anyone on there that you think could be a holdout heading into training camp that's on here?
It's a good question. I don't think we'll see too much of that. Some of these offensive linemen could certainly go that route. I guess to some degree, the James Cook situation in Buffalo doesn't appear to be resolving itself anytime soon, to the fact, to the point of GM Brandon being going on some radio shows and saying we've had he knows our numbers and that's where we'll be in September. So, when that's being said publicly, it's not great for your negotiation process. Rashawn Slater in the Chargers room is fascinating for a couple of reasons. He should reset this thing that Tristan Wirfs did a really nice job with last year. You and I have talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a younger group. The Herbert contract is somewhat gaudy, but there's a lot of rookie talent on that roster. And they did just draft Joe Alt last year, right? So there's a competing, at least right tackle that I think could swing over within the next couple of years if he develops a little bit more. But he needs a $30 million per year contract extension, in my opinion. So that's one to watch over the next couple of months here, because Justin Herbert without a left tackle, Justin Herbert with a left tackle gets hurt. Justin Herbert without a left tackle is a dead man walking in that Chargers offense. So that's one to watch, because that's a team that should be budding right now for the next couple of seasons.
Their upside takes a nice hit if Rashawn Slater is not out on the field. Let's get to our quick hits to wrap today's episode. More football talk. The Steelers and the Dolphins have renewed their talks for tight end Jonnu Smith after contract negotiations stall down in Miami. I have a trade offer. See if you accept this on behalf of either side. A tight end swap. Jonnu Smith for Pat Freiermuth. I think that the Steelers tight end room would be overrun if Jonnu Smith showed up into town. They also have Darnell Washington, who's a nice upside type of player. 3 tight ends that you don't have room for doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Freiermuth, I was looking at his contract. It looks like there's an out this year. I don't know if they've already passed the deadline on that, so I'll defer to you on that. But the Dolphins would need some help. I don't recognize a single name on the tight end room when it comes to Miami Dolphins if they were to let go of Jonnu Smith. So what do you think of my tight end swap idea?
I'd say no, and here's why. 2 reasons. Number one, the reason that these talks are renewed from Pittsburgh's side is they lost Donald Parham Jr. to an Achilles tear last week in OTAs, and they're looking to replace that third tight end with a veteran tight end. And the other reason is they don't really have any wide receivers, so these are their pass catchers for 2025 as of right now. And I do think it's going to be a big important part to some quarterbacks' offense for the next few months. We don't know who that is just yet, but I do like this fit quite a bit. I will finish with this point because this is in your neck of the woods. That Miami Dolphins team, you and I have talked about quite a bit, and they have been holding closely the idea that they are still a team in contention. And yet there's 3 or 4 players that continually get brought up in trade conversations from Miami, right? I just feel like that team is dying to go down, but the money isn't letting them right now. Do you get that sense from the Dolphins organization, or do you think that they truly believe they can contend in the AFC, at least from a wild card standpoint?
It's honestly, it's hard to get a tough read on it because I think they feel like they have to try and compete with the roster they have right now. I just get the vibe that they don't even like it.
I think
they'd prefer.
I think there's a world, Brandon,
Ramsey.
where I think Ramsey, Tyreek Hill, and Jonnu Smith are in serious trade block conversations right now, and that's only 3. There are defensive players who I think are also in this conversation, and I do think there's a world where they're one of the worst teams in the AFC in 2025, and they draft Tua's replacement in 2026. That seems like a very logical next 12 months for this organization. So getting cheaper either now or at the trade deadline should be a priority. So I do think this Jonnu stuff is real. Pittsburgh's the one that took themselves out of it initially. Miami's been in on this, and I don't think we're done. I think Miami's going to be in on a few other conversations over the course of the next couple of months.
I feel like their draft spoke louder than anything else. When teams start drafting in the trenches offensively and defensively, they are signaling with a big, bright flag, we are rebuilding. and that's exactly what they did, which is the right move. But they are sort of up against it financially. The Rockies completed their first 3-game sweep since May of 2024. For the record, if you haven't checked the calendar recently, it is June of 2025. Is the turnaround on the way for the Colorado Rockies? By the way, we are on a 2-week streak here of the Rockies making it onto the podcast.
You know, sometimes things just line up and you don't even write the script. So the series that they won was the Marlins. So we can't take too much stock in it because everything about the Marlins says that they're not a real baseball team. So it's a good win for Colorado. I'm just going to say this because, man, I've spent all week hearing about the Rockies and how they are, a half-run organization and they should be ashamed of themselves. And they're in the White Sox conversation and the Marlins conversation. And I said it a couple of years ago on this pod, and I'll say it again today. I don't put them in that conversation. I don't. I know they're not winning ball games, and I know that life is tough right now for Rockies fans, but they have made an effort. They have extended internal players. They have attempted free agent swings. I know that they don't have massive free agent numbers. That is not front office driven. That is geographical and stadium and all the things you and I have talked about before driven. And they just have to deal with the reality of what they are as a franchise and do the best they can. They have handed out gaudy contracts that made no sense, but with an attempt to show the rest of the league that they mean business, right? They're going to trade those players now because now they're at a point where they just have to start back at square one. And the Chris Bryant contract is just going to become an albatross. But I don't put them in everybody everybody throw your wallets away mode. We're not doing that. They have made an effort. They have made an effort every 4 to 5 years to try to do this. So they're in this conversation we had from the basketball world, Brandon, where they are trying to be aggressive. They just got this one wrong, and it's fantastically wrong. And certainly don't stop talking about how fantastically wrong it's going to get over the next 4 months. But I'm not going to kill them too much here because they do try. They do make an attempt. And sooner rather than later, when some of these prospects get here, they will do it again. They will spend money. But again, I'll say we said last time, they got to do something about the stadium. That's it. They got to spend $40 billion to get here.
I mean, there really is no bigger advocate for Colorado Rockies baseball than Mike Ginnitti. I hope you guys are putting that together. They are. You mentioned the NBA. They remind me a little bit of the Brooklyn Nets. Like they can't figure themselves out, but it's not for a lack of trying. They have tried to be successful. They're just not good at it. There's a difference between the two. Let's get to our Bettor Edge bet of the week. NBA Finals, Game 1 tonight. The Thunder are 9.5-point favorites. The total at 230.5. I'll let you decide which one you want to go with, or we could just pick both, the total and the side, for Game 1 of this series.
I'm trying to figure out which game Indiana's going to keep close. It's going to be one of these two. I'm going to take the over on the total. Is that okay?
I'm good with it. All the trends point to the under. We're actually on an 8-0 under run in the NBA Finals. So I'm
really
good with the last 8 NBA Finals games have all gone under the total. But these are two over teams, so it's there's a little bit of a divide there. I'm good with that. I am going to step in and take the Pacers for the side portion of this conversation. Game 1s have been their bread and butter throughout the postseason. They seem to take teams by storm with the way that they play. It's very non-playoff basketball with the pace that they play at. If they're going to keep one of these games close, the way that I see the script playing out, they keep it close. They make it look like they're going to win. They end up losing by 5, and then they get demolished in Game 2. That's kind of the way I see this playing out. You good with that?
Put your money with it. I like it. I love it.
All right, so I'm on Pacers plus 9.5 and the under at 230.5. This episode has been presented by Bettor Edge. Sign up, try it out, bet with your friends, and use the promo code SPOTTRACK over at bettoredge.com or on their mobile app. Get $20 at sign up when you do that. Do us a favor, subscribe and rate the pod that you're enjoying right now, and make sure you visit SPOTTRACK.com for all the latest in the sports contractual world.